Konnichiwa. My name is Diogo, and it is a great honor for me to be here to talk about PPPs in water and sanitation and its effects with the coronavirus pandemic. I'm here in this beautiful ancient water tank in Lisbon. This water tank was built during the late 18th and the beginning of the 19th century. And fortunately, here in Portugal we have this moderate weather, and water supply was always a concern, a historical concern. But this is not the case in many countries. The World Bank estimates that only 71% of the world population have access to safely managed water supply, and only about 4 out of 10 people have access to safely managed sanitation. So 6 in each 10 people does not have access to safely managed sanitation, and this can cause diseases. It is necessary a huge investment to bring water safely managed and sanitation to everyone worldwide. The World Bank estimates an investment gap of $113 billion per year, every year until 2030 to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. We know that many countries do not have limited resources of money, of finance to meet this financial gap. So the private sector will be called to help closing this financial gap. And how can the private sector help? What can they bring to the public? So, first of all, it is important to understand that PPPs and the private sector are not an objective by itself. They are a tool, a mean of the public entities to achieve certain objectives. And what are these objectives? Extend network coverage, reduce cost of service, improve quality of service, improve efficiency, and also to assure sustainability for future generations. But make no mistake, PPPs, they have successes and they have failures. They have advantages and disadvantages. Like any other management model, we have to learn from the mistakes and from the successes to improve these PPPs. We have to assess the value for money and the value for people before we decide if we're going to move forward a PPP or not. Value for money is always necessary to assess the public interest of a PPP, whereas value for people, it is important to assess the value for society, for environment, and for local economy. So, after this brief introduction, let's move forward to what brings us here, the effects of COVID-19 pandemic in PPPs in water and sanitation. Basically, utilities are facing 3 major concerns. The first concern is with their workforce and assuring a 24/7 water supply. They have concerns about the staff contamination, concerns about the supply chain of chemicals, of spare parts, concerns of health and safety measures, contingency plans, and assuring shifts throughout the 24 hours per day. The second concern is about reduction of consumption, of water consumption, and on revenues as well. Because if on one hand domestic consumption is increasing because there are more people at home, the truth is that industry, commerce and tourism faced a drastic decrease on consumption, leading to less revenues than before. And there are concerns about affordability. There are more unemployment and layoffs, and the people are at their homes, and utilities cannot cut off the service for non-payments. And again, this leads to less revenues. In Latin America and in Southeast Asia, a 12 to 13% decrease on capital expenditure is expected due to delays in procurement, delays in construction, even problems with the supply chain. And in Africa, again, 12% of capital expenditure decrease is expected, with some utilities facing 60 to 70% less revenues than before. Global Water Intelligence predicts that a 2% decrease will happen from 2019 to 2020, whereas before the pandemic they predicted a 6% growth on capital expenditure. And for 2021 they predict a recovery of a 5% growth on a capital expenditure. So how did the PPPs react to the pandemic situation? In terms of contract arrangements and governments, the impact is yet unknown. Only from mid-2021 onwards we will understand the impact on contracts. We know that some contracts have force majeure clauses that predicts pandemics, but some other contracts, their force majeure clause does not predict pandemics. We know that in some cases the private operator have insurances for lost profit, and in that case they may be on the safe side. And we know that some private operators will require compensation or even tariff increases to the public renter. But one thing is for sure, no one wins. There are no winners in this situation. The public party has to understand that the private sector cannot bear the costs of the pandemic by themselves, and the utilities must understand that the public renter cannot bear the costs by themselves. Common sense is needed here. So I will give you some examples from the response during the pandemic in Portugal. One operator called Indaqua from Mia Group centered their attentions on social responsibility. They have donated protective equipment to the fire force and nursing homes. They have donated 40 beds to one hospital, and they have donated money to another hospital so they can put together a COVID-19 unit. They have donated 150 computers to children that are at home and needs the computer to learn from their homes. And they put up together a scheme for the sons and daughters of their workers so they can study at home. One other player called Aquapol, they came up with this solution, this innovative software to monitor their workforce. They have about 1,000 workers, and they need to know who is contaminated, who is on quarantine, who is on the shift tonight. So they came up with a real-time software that monitors the workforce so they can provide an efficient operation during this situation. One other player, Plain Water. Plain Water centered their attention on the customer relationship. They actually improved proximity rather than distance by improving their site, by putting together social media activity, by putting together gamification as education. So, what about the PPP after the pandemic? Actually, PPPs may face increasing activity after this situation. Why? Because they may boost economy recovery. They can help closing the financial gap that is even wider by now. And I believe that this crisis will create more resilient PPPs. Lessons from this pandemic will be helpful in drafting more transparent and clearer arrangements. And the new generation of PPP contracts will emerge with provisions to face world crises like this one. Operations will consider new health and safety measures. And ultimately, I believe that partnerships will be stronger after this situation. To finish my presentation, let me tell you a little bit about the International Specialist Center of Excellence on PPPs on water and sanitation. The Center of Excellence was established to collect information and understand PPP failures and successes both from the past and the current PPPs, and to distill from such experience the best practices on PPPs. We are supporting governments on putting together PPP programs, and we are sharing knowledge and promoting stakeholders cooperation, all the stakeholders cooperation. We are planning several activities such as preparing case studies and best practices. We want to put together a water expert council with the best of the best PPP experts so they can talk about trends and threats on PPPs. We want to prepare a short list of experts to put together a worldwide shortlist available for government and public entities. We want to manage conciliation before the public and the private went into disputes. And we want to issue a People First PPP rating for those PPPs who voluntarily want to do so, obviously. And we want to issue also a People First PPP certification. And in the end, we are monitoring and updating PPP international standards. So you are all very welcome to join us, and domo arigato gozaimashita.